The gorgeous Johnny Tudor. Lovely to finally meet you, Johnny. And albeit again, sadly, virtually in this world we're living in. Firstly, I want to sort of kick off because I saw this wonderful piece of, well, footage on your social media. Now, what a fabulous dance. Where'd you get your energy from, first of all? And what was the idea behind that? Because it's great, actually. It cheered me up.
You saw me tap dancing in the garage, did you?
We'll do it anywhere, love, won't we?
Anyway, yeah. There's no shows. Do it in the garage. I told Boris I'm working from home. The other thing is that I've always been a song and dance man. That's how I started. Because my dad was a musical entertainer as well. He was a piano player and a singer. My mother was a dancer, so I was brought up in the game. Yeah. So my mother taught me stuff when I was little, and I used to pick it up from the girls and the chorus and all this. And then eventually, when I went into the business, that's what I did. I sang and I danced, and now I'm acting and writing and all sorts of stuff.
You have to be versatile, Johnny, don't you? I think that's the key, really.
Yeah. Well, you just can't live on what, like the old man told me, he said, if you're just going to be a dancer, which is what originally I was, he said, you're not going to be working after 30, 35, because they want young dancers. He said, so you got to sing. I said, can't sing, I said. He said, you haven't tried. He said, so I didn't sing a note till I was about 16. And then I got some singing lessons, and, well, the rest is history, isn't it?
Well, also, because I saw you touring a show, which I sadly did miss, and I was going to try and catch it at the City Varieties, Give Me the Moonlight, which was your take on Frankie Vaughan, wasn't it? I mean, obviously you knew him, and I'd met him a few times. What was he like for you? I thought he was fabulous.
He was a lovely man. I mean, he was always an idol of mine. I looked a bit like him. So when I was young, they used to say the young Frankie and that. Yeah. And I never thought I would meet him. But I was doing a tour in Africa. I was doing all the five-star hotels around the periphery, like Swaziland, Sun City and all that. And Frank was doing the same circuit, but he was a week in front of me. So it was great. I was coming in, doing an impression the following week, and they'd just seen him. See? Anyway, we arrived at Johannesburg Airport. And I'd never met him. And he was fantastic. I was stood there with my wife, and he's there with his wife. And he said, the girls want to buy some perfume. He said, go on, John, I'll mind your bag. So there's me. My idol is watching my bags.
Wow.
So the following year, I did it again, the same circuit. And I'm in steerage on the plane. He's up first class. And I got a message from one of the girls. Oh, Mr. Vaughan would like you to go up front and have a coffee with him. He's so quite all right. So I went up, but he said, no, you can stay here all the way, John. So I went back first class. He was one of those nice men, that he looked out for other people.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's you forget, actually, I was watching him in an old film the other day, and he was kind of like the Elvis at that moment in his career. It was like a late 50s, and they were trying to make him like this hard man. But he sadly for me, he just didn't come across as a hard man, because you could see he was a nice person.
Yeah.
He came out as a nice
riots.
guy.
He stopped riots he used to work for the boys' clubs a lot, because when he was a kid, he was a bit of a tearaway. See? Yeah. So when he grew up and he had a few bob, he thought, I'll help out. And there was a big riot, I think, in Glasgow, and he mediated between these gangs. I mean, he was just a social conscience is what he had. He was one of those kind of people. Great bloke.
And do you think you'll take the show out again yourself when we can do it, do you think?
Unfortunately, the people that used to be his fans, I mean, if you listen, they never play his records anymore. And he was the biggest star in the country at the time, late 50s, beginning of the 60s. And funny, I was listening to Don Black last week, and he said the same thing. He said he was speaking to Stella, Frank's wife, and she said, nobody plays him anymore. He said, well, I'll remedy that. And he played There Must Be a Way. And he was a good singer, really good singer.
Yeah.
So if I took it out again, to answer your question, I don't think there'd be a big enough audience for it.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because I think what needs to happen really with things like that, Johnny, and you're doing a good job by reminding people, really, when you took it around. But I think you need like one of those TV biographies, don't you? That, BBC 4 or something that kickstarts people's interest again. And you go, oh, I remember him. Yeah. Because it's interesting you mentioned him. I mean, Sir Cliff Richard, I feel sorry for him. He never gets played really on radio. I mean, it's very, you might one or two tracks, but... not really. And
he's the biggest star we've ever had. He's on 100 hit records. I mean, it's just 100, no messing about, I think Americans are different. Americans kind of revere their older performers. Like Frank Sinatra was revered till the end, and Dean Martin. But Frankie and people like that, they just seem to, we don't know who he is,
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah. I mean, talking of somebody who's done a lot, you've done a lot, right, Johnny? And I was looking at your CV. I mean, we're going to get to your books as well, but I just want to... Now, I didn't realise, or I should have said, forgot, you'd done Opportunity Knocks. Now,
That's right.
Opportunity Knocks, for those that are too young who are watching this, it was the precursor really to, well, before that there was Carol Levis's Radio Discoveries, wasn't there? And then there was Opportunity Knocks with Hughie Green, which was, for me, as a kid growing up, was phenomenal. I mean, it was the biggest show on telly.
And he made loads of stars.
He made lots of stars, yeah, but how did you get involved in, and what was your process, and how nervous were you, Johnny, really?
Well, it was a strange... My father, as I told you, was in the business, and he rang up a fellow called Eddie Espinosa, who had a ballet school or something. He was a friend of my dad's. So he said, well, I know this woman, Doris Barry. Now, Doris Barry was the associate producer, but she was the sister of Alicia Markova, the famous ballet dancer.
Oh, yes.
So he got me an audition. So I do the audition for this for Doris Barry, and she liked it. She said, well, Hughie's got to see you. Can you get to Liverpool? He's doing auditions at the Jacob's Biscuit Factory. So I said, okay. So up I go to Liverpool. I do this audition at the Jacob's Biscuit Factory, and I got the part. Obviously, that's what happened. But it was a funny audition, I tell you. There was a guy came in a grey suit, grey shoes, grey tie. And then Hughie looked at him, he said, hello, Norman, go on, born free. He knew he's every time he went, this guy turned up and sang Born Free. The thing with Hughie Green was, he was good to the pros. He gave you enough time. He always gave you a good plug. I mean, some of the stuff today, I don't know what you think, it's a bit cruel, the way they just have a go at performers when they're on talent shows. It's like the judges are trying to make names for themselves being cruel and saying nasty things, whereas Hughie never did. Never did.
Well, do you know what's interesting? Because I did meet Hughie Green very briefly, and you see all the other sides of the stories about, you know, what he was like and everything. I agree with you. You know, what I saw, you know, was the way he really seemed very positive to, you know, to people like Little and Large, Lena Zavaroni, and all those people that were... I mean, I remember my first probably TV memory, if you like, was the endless appearances of Peterson Lee, because I was fascinated by... sadly, you know, the blind pianist Lenny P. When you're a kid, you find that fascinating, you know. They just ended up being chart toppers and big albums and all sorts of stuff. You know? And I realised at that point that was very powerful what Hughie Green was doing, you know, what he could achieve.
Well, it was a huge audience. As you think of those days, there weren't the channels they've got today. So it had like 13 or 14,000 viewers. Million viewers. You can imagine, you know, huge audience. I mean, I remember talking about Peterson Lee, Dorothy Squires. I was staying at Dorothy's house in Bray. I was doing a show in the West End in the Pigalle or somewhere. She said, come on, she said, we're going down to the East End. There's a guy I want to see. And it was Lenny Peters. And he was the organist in this pub before he was Peterson Lee. I can see him now. He's playing like jazz, you know? But that's the first time. And I did do a gig with them once in Grays in Essex. But I didn't really know them well, just the once I worked with them.
You mentioned the
But Freddie Starr was another one.
Go on, sorry. Star. But the Pigalle Club, now, you know, for a lot of people, that was like an exclusive night spot, wasn't it? And if you got there, Johnny, you were, you know, you were on the way up, as it were, you know, if you're not already there. What was that like, and how, you know, what sort of people played the Pigalle Club? Well,
I remember Sammy Davis. It was the first place he played when he came to London. Was the Pigalle. But then it was bought, I think it was run by Delfond organisation. And Robert Nesbitt, who used to be the producer of the Command Performance, he was the producer. And they put this show on, and it was like a review. So I did an audition at the Talk of the Town now. Wow. And it was Robert Nesbitt in the audience, obviously, and Irving Davis. Do you remember Irving Davis, a great choreographer?
I've heard of him. I'm too young.
When he used to do all the Cilla Black shows, he did everything. And he was, I think he was partner with, what was the other guy? Hughie? No, can't remember. Anyway, I did the audition. And then when I finished the audition, I said to Irving, I said, by the way, I think we had the same dance teacher, because he's from Cardiff. So he said, who's that? I said, Kitty. He said, Kitty, darling, that's my teacher, darling. And we got on like house on fire. And so I did 6 months at the Pigalle in this review. Wow. With Tudor Davis. Do you know Tudor? He plays Dame a lot now.
Yeah, big Panto star, isn't he? Yeah,
that's him. Yeah, well, there was Tudor and I and a couple others, and people, and we did this 6 months gig in the Pigalle, and then I got fed up and I wanted to leave, and I was offered a show in. It was a musical going on at the Fortune Theatre. It's called Cindy. It was the Jewish version of Cinderella, would you believe? and I played a guy called Lucky, who was really the buttons part.
Yes.
And one of the it wasn't very good actually. And one of the reviews was the best. When the curtain fell on Cindy, it was the best material I'd seen all night.
They're so cruel, aren't they, critics?
And they're terrible, yeah.
You know.
Somebody said they're felt-tipped assassins there.
I've got to be honest, because I obviously have been a reviewer and all that sort of stuff. But I remember meeting the Daily Mail's Jack Tinker, who was a lovely man. And
I met Jack Tinker.
Yeah, lovely man. And he said to me when I was starting out, he said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything, because he said, that you're putting people out of work. And that really resonated, obviously coming from the background that we do. Because when the critics have a go, you're putting out the stage doorman, the ice cream seller, the bar people, all sorts of those people are losing their job. And it does annoy me. There's one particular oaf that you see a lot in the West End, and he sits there and he comes in and he sort of holds court, and you think, what can you do?
Exactly.
What I think is, well, what can you do? You can barely fit in the chair, and sits there with a big beard and check shirt and everything. You're thinking, why would anybody be frightened of you? I don't get it. But
no me.
It's the way
well, they
that
slacked
people
off.
are.
They slated Les Mis, and it was the biggest thing ever. But it was a terrible slating when it came up first. I mean, what was it Jerry Lewis used to say, the great Jerry Lewis? He said, critics are not even worth ignoring. That's lovely, Logan.
That's so true. Now, listen, we've got to touch on your brilliant book, which you kindly sent me. It's all about, for people that may not remember this wonderful lady, the wonderful and late Dorothy Squires. Now, I have a strange association because my father met her when she was at the Batley Variety Club. And apparently she was as earthy as you can imagine.
Oh, yes.
With the people, But give us a flavour of what Dorothy was like for those that didn't know, because you knew her very well, Johnny. Yeah,
well, I go back a long way with Dots because she knew my dad. So consequently, when I went to London, the first meeting with her, with me, was when I was about 18. I'm in London going for an audition. And my dad and I are walking down Wardour Street. And who's coming towards me? But Dorothy, with Norman Newell, her recording manager, and Roger Moore, who was the Saint at the time. He was a big star already, right? So I'm knocked out with this, and she sees my dad. And she says, Bert, and a couple of expletives after it. There he is. She said, Roger, do you remember him? I knew him when I had big boobs and straw in my hair. So he said, she said, well, I had these big boobs, she said. They were so big, when I spun around, it was like I was going to take off like a helicopter. I mean, she was a character. Anyway, I went to stay with her whenever I was in London, so I knew her from that age up, if you like. She used to say, come and stay with me. She had this wonderful house in Bexley, 22 rooms, swimming pool, the lot. And the parties, you didn't know who you were sitting next to. All the stars would turn up because she knew everybody. Because she was a huge star in the 40s and 50s. And then she made the comeback, of course, in the 70s. Yeah. Because she was with Roger for, I think it was 8 years. She was with Roger. She married him in New York. And she told my mother, she said, I only had $8 left when I got married. She said I'd spent it all promoting Roger, which is what she did. Yeah. And he acknowledged it in the end, actually, that she did help him, more than helped him in his career. Yeah. So, I just know everything about her, really. She was great heart of gold, do anything for you, but don't cross her. She was one of those. Her niece, Emily, told me once, she's a cross between Auntie Mame and Cruella de Vil. You never know which one you were going to get,
But again, it's strange, because I was lucky enough to interview Roger Moore quite a few times, and every time, we did kind of almost one of his very last interviews, actually, Johnny, and he was very open about at that point how, you know, she really helped him.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed that that life story has not been turned into a film, because it's a romantic love story, really, isn't it? About somebody who couldn't let go, and you know, he'd gone off, and it must have been very sad. When you were writing the book yourself, because I have to say, you're a compelling writer. I couldn't stop reading it. But when you were going through it, I mean, obviously you lived it as well, so you know the story very well. Yeah. Did your opinion change of her? You know, did you sort of think, oh, it was a lot harder than I realised, even though you were there, you know? Not
really. I mean, I was there at the point just after he left, if you like.
Yeah.
And she was in a really bad state, and she went to bed and wouldn't get up for months. She was that upset about everything. She went on the amphetamines and everything. And I mean, it's heartbreaking, really. But eventually she pulled herself up by her bootstraps and made the comeback, because she had to, because she needed the money. We tend to think she might have been bipolar by today's. We don't know this, because she was either high as a kite and everybody was her friend, and she was buying racehorses or whatever, and then other times she wouldn't even go out the house. So we think perhaps she could have been bipolar.
Yeah.
But she was a great character. I mean, she was something else. Really was.
I love the story in the book as well, which you detail very well, about when Eddie Fisher covered one of her songs.
Oh, God. She went berserk.
It's a brilliant story, though, about how she... you know, you have to admire the single-mindedness, Johnny, of to go out and say, I'm going to make it a hit myself now in America. I mean, without the internet, without all the technology we have now, to try and do that showed some guts, doesn't it, really?
Oh, she had so much... I mean, you know the story... She made this record that Billy Reid, who was her partner at the time, wrote, and she was having all these hits over here with it. And then somebody did an acetate, a recording of it, and sent it to America, unbeknown to her. Yeah. So that's what happened. And Eddie Fisher said, I'm going to do this. And of course, Eddie Fisher was a huge star, and he went up in the chart. She went berserk. So she went to America, and because she couldn't get network coverage, she went on all the local radio stations in a car and did thousands of miles plugged in this record. She was tenacious, is the word that comes to mind. Yeah.
And you touched on that great comeback that everybody talks about. And you know what? I admire that. I really do, because we've all been in this job where everybody turns their back on you. You're not in flavour anymore.
Yeah.
You can't get bookings. People don't want to know you, agents, managers, all that sort of stuff. So what an absolute empowerment for her. I mean, they talk about girl power, but she had it to be able to say, I'm going to take the Palladium, I'm going to hire it. And then to see the fruition come of selling it out, not once, but twice. Yeah. I mean, you were on the bill, right? So what was that like for you? What was the evening like, you know?
Well, it was unbelievable. I mean, for a start, it sold out in hours. Everybody thought she was crazy when she did this, because she'd been to America with him for 8 years, with Roger, and so consequently, nobody thought that she had the same pulling power when she came back. So she went to Delfont and wanted to, you know, and he said, well, sorry, doctor, they still remember you. She said, I'll hire the Palladium myself. And she paid the money herself. Wow. Everybody said, you're crazy, you're going to lose your money. And it sold out in hours. There were touts couldn't get tickets. I mean, it was an amazing evening. So, as you say, I was on the bill. In fact, I've got this here. I found it. Look, see it. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what a lovely thing to have, though, Johnny.
What fantastic! You know? But the night, it was. I used to watch her, you know, from the wings, and it was like an education to watch her doing a call. Yeah. She was a terrific performer. And how I got the part on the I mean, she knew me from before, but I was doing the Gibraltar Song Festival, and they'd written an anthem for Gibraltar, and they wanted Dot to sing it. So I win the competition out there, out of 15 countries, and Dot's in the audience, and she comes backstage. She said, "You've won this," she said, and she shouted out, "You've won it! What are you doing?" Whatever it was, I can't remember. December the. I said, I don't know, look at my book. I was in some club in South Wales somewhere. She said, no, you're not. You're going to be on the Palladium with me. I went, what? I said, what size orchestra? She said, about 30. I said, I haven't got the parts, Dot. She said, well, get them. Because I got paid for the parts. You know what I mean? But that's how I got there. So the night was a phenomenon. And what was the guy that used to make the dresses for her? Hugh Darnell. He used to make all these beautiful dresses. He used to do Shirley Bassey's dress. He was fantastic. Anyway, she's waiting now, and Pete Murray is comparing, and she's refusing to go on because the dress hasn't arrived.
Gosh.
So Pete says, what am I going to do? She said, go on Pad, tell him a joke. He said, I'm not a comedian. She said, I don't care, get on this. And then Dougie runs in. He'd been so in this dress in a taxi, and he's stuck in a traffic jam somewhere. And she grabs the dress. She stood there in her knickers and nothing else. She grabs the dress, pulls it on. She said, "I'll see you after. By the way, it looks great." And on she goes. And she got a standing ovation to start before she even opened her mouth, because people love this fighter woman who'd done this. Yeah, and they just stood up. I mean, the hair on the back of your neck, it was amazing. And then she sailed into a 2-hour session. Gee whiz, I never like it.
Yeah.
She was such a great... As you say about the film, originally, before I wrote the book, I was working with a guy called Paul Turner, who was a film director who'd had an Oscar nomination, and he wanted to do the film. And we wrote a film, an actual screenplay, but it never got produced. Because, you know, trying to get money for films is like pulling teeth. Yeah. And that's how the book came about. Yeah. Because we sent the screenplay to the theatre in Cardiff, the Sherman, and they did a stage play of it, which we wrote, called Say It With Flowers. And then people wanted to know more about it, so that's why I wrote the book.
Do you know, but it's a fabulous read, you know, it really is, and I recommend anybody who's watching this to go out and get a copy, because it is just an education, as you say, in show business. And it's quite sad in a sense. Elements of the book are really sad because, you know, when she ended up living with a fan and all of those sort of things, you think... Yeah. I think people, it's a bit Judy Garlandy, isn't it? Like, I think people run out of energy with her, you know, they just must have thought, enough, you know. That's right, and I remember, because I'm from Yorkshire, and I remember reading in my local paper, you know, when I was at school, I think that she'd moved in with a fan in Dewsbury or something, you know, and I was thinking, what's she doing there, you know? Well,
what happened was, when she lost her house in Brace, because she went bankrupt, they took everything off her. Yeah. Her own fault, of course. She had 6 racehorses with Jenny Pittman. I mean, crazy. I mean, anyway, she went bankrupt and she had nowhere to live. So Meic Povey, who was a pianist, as she knew, I think he lived up in Kettlethorpe or somewhere.
Yeah, I know Mike. Yeah, lovely man.
Yeah, but he unfortunately he's passed away now. But anyway, he got in touch with a woman that owned the Ace of Clubs in Leeds, the nightclub.
Oh yes, yeah.
And she had a little cottage there, and she said, "Well, Dot can have it, and as long as she." Anyway, this woman then eventually died, so the cottage had to be sold because the family wanted to sell it. So she's homeless again. So it's in the local paper, Dorothy Squires homeless, and a fan from South Wales who had a chip shop up the valleys said, "I've got a house, she can stay in there." So that's how she ended up back in Wales, skint, living up the valleys in a chip shop. I thought, I don't believe this. This is a woman who had a house, maids, and it was so sad, you know, because she'd worked. Dorothy went to London when she was 16 on a train with a day trip, with only a day trip and about £2 in her pocket. And took a hell of a chance and became a huge star, and then ended up with nothing. It was really sad, really sad.
Do you think, though, Johnny, looking back now at her life, was that, do you think, just mismanagement on her part, or was it people taking advantage of her, you know? What was your perception of that, really?
I think more her downfall was her own ego, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, the Roger Moore thing, that was different. She fell in love with Roger when she was a star, and then she took him to America and really spent a lot of money on him. Then when he left, she was devastated. So she had no money. It was going down you can't live on nothing, can you? Yeah. So she had to go back to work. She rang my father, who lived in South Wales, and said, "Bert, I've got to get some money," she said, "because I'm getting a bit skint." And he booked her some working men's clubs. And he said, "Dot, they only paid like £15 a night." At that time, it was the 60s. Yeah. He said, "I'll see what I can do." And he went around and he got £50 a night, and she doubled. So she was earning £100 a night, a lot of money then. Yeah. And she made £1,500 in 2 weeks. So with the money, she made an album in Llanelli. Decca did an album, a live album. Yeah. And I was on the bill as well. And anyway, that kicked it off. And that made her think, I'm going to do the Palladium next. She always thought big. Yeah. The Palladium paid off. And then we did the tour, and the tour paid off. But instead of like resting on her laurels, she had a beautiful house, she had money again. She started doing more records, paying for this, buying racehorses, not paying the tax.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those big stars did the same thing. They think it's never going to end, and it does.
Because I think, as I say, when you read the book, it's you bring her to life so vividly, Johnny, you know. And I think for people that are fans, and there are still many fans of Dorothy, I think it's a great read because from somebody who actually knew her. You know, I like a biography from somebody who actually was there rather than, you know, the people just talking to friends who have got maybe grievances or, you know.
Yeah.
You think,
no, I just saw it through my eyes. It was all first-hand stuff. Or I had it from Emily, the niece, who used to be my girlfriend. I'm still in touch with her now. And I had all these wonderful stories, you know. But I mean, you'd be in the parties and you wouldn't know who the hell you were sitting next to. I was sat next to Phil Spector once. I didn't know who he was. He's in jail now for murder, but he was sat next to me. I said, who's this fella? He had the dark glasses and the big wig on. She said, it's Phil Spector. They all knew her.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But it's a lesson as well, isn't it, Johnny, that you can know all these people, as she did, obviously, like the Liberaces and everybody, but nobody really reaches out when you're down. I think in the world of show business, you have to pull yourself up, then they want to know you again, you know. So
Exactly.
But let's talk to you, quickly about you because we haven't got that much time. But I want you are part of a phenomenal cult, shall we say now, of Gavin and Stacey fans.
That's right.
I mean, you know, again, it's wonderful, isn't it? Because you just never know which way your career is going to go. And you know, I look at these sitcoms, and there's very few over the decades that you have Dad's Army, Are You Being Served, and our generation, this generation, really is Gavin and Stacey. You know,
Gavin and Stacey.
When you saw it and you first read it and everything, did you think, this is brilliant? Was your perception?
I had no idea. I just got a call from my agent. Can you go for the audition at the College of Music in Cardiff? They're doing some sitcom. And he sent me for the part of Dave Coaches, the guy that had the coach that got married to her in the end. So anyway, I read this part, and they said, we don't think you look like a bus driver. I said, okay. So they threw the disc jockey at me. See, so do that. I said, okay. So I did this disc jockey. I hadn't gone like 5 yards, and they called me back. Okay, you've got the disc jockey. So I thought that was all it was going to be, just the one episode. Yeah. Then I get another call from them saying, look, John, can you come back in? I said, what, disc jockey? No, you're the same guy. You got another job now. You're doing the bingo in this club. I said, all right. So I go in, and I'm the bingo guy. Then I thought that was it again. Then they said, no, you got a cafe now. Your name's Marco. So I was in it 3 times. It's the same guy doing different jobs. You know what I mean?
but that's showbiz, isn't it? That is how we live. You see what I mean? Yeah.
But nobody knew it was going to be the hit it was. It was just took off.
Yeah.
But you know why I think it did? Because it was down to earth and it was true to life. People weren't making jokes. It was situations that were funny. Because a lot of sitcoms, I don't know what you think, is people telling each other jokes. That's not a situation comedy. The situation was this guy in Essex and the woman in Cardiff, in Barry, and it was the combination of the different humours, if you like.
Well, no, nobody knew. Also, we learnt more about Welsh humour. You know, the woman who was always wanting to make an omelette. I mean, what's that about? You know?
I know. And dear old Maggie John playing the old girl. You know, she was funny, Margaret John. She was a wonderful lady. She died, unfortunately, but she was wonderful. I worked with her on another series called High Hopes, which is a very similar thing that was only shown in Wales. But it was a great cast. Everybody, all the cast were typically, how can I say, they were perfectly cast. Yes. The people who had, you know, somebody once told me once, if you write a line and they say, oh, you can take that line, it's not very good writing. Yes. So it's got to be your character that says that line. Yeah. And I think that's what it was about. You know, the characters were all good. Yeah.
We also have to mention you've got a new book. Now, tell me about the book and what it's the book about, Johnny.
Right. Well, it's called Peg's Boys, and it's about my own being brought up in show business with my father. But when I was about 8 or 9, he gave it up. He took a pub in Caerphilly in South Wales, and I got involved with a couple of tearaway kids. We're only about 8 or 9 years old. And one of them said, let's go to Cardiff. I said, where is it? He says, over that mountain. And we walked to Cardiff. Now, don't ask me. That was the germ of the idea. But these 3 kids, we became firm friends all our lives. But we didn't see each other for quite a bit in the middle. So we all ended up, I became, as you know, a singer, dancer, actor. Yes. My other friend became a dental surgeon. And the other one became a lawyer. The dental surgeon turned up at my house when he was at college with a gun. He says, I got to get out of town, John. I said, why? He said, there's a contract out. I thought he was taking the mickey. And what he'd been doing while he was at Guy's, he was working on the docks as a night watchman to earn some money. And he was letting these crooks in to steal stuff off the docks. He got pulled in and they got arrested and they thought that he was, a grass, and he wasn't. And there was genuinely a contract on it. So I didn't see him for like 15 years. Next thing I know, he rings me up. He's married somebody that was in the aristocracy in France. She'd married somebody in the Pompidou government, and the father was a viceroy of Africa, and he had a huge spread in the south of France. But he was still a bit warm. He was doing operations, what he called his black ops. If somebody got shot, he'd patch him up. And the other one was a lawyer. I mean, but we all got together at the end. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up, really. But basically,
it's fascinating, though, yeah, because you've got it from real life, you know.
That's right.
Again, I have to say, the way you write is very vivid and it's very warm. You know, I can picture things, you know, when I'm looking at it. I think, oh, very nice. Do you now? What's the process of you writing? Do you go off for a couple of hours every day, or are you quite, because I find doing books. I've done a few myself, and I'm not as dedicated as many people are, and I get bored quite quickly and think, oh, I've done enough now, whereas other authors sit for 2-3 hours a day. What's your process on that?
Well, usually when I was doing the book, it's finished now, it's in the process of being published. It'll be out probably Christmas. I used to try and do about 2 hours, but then the brain starts going to mush and you're writing rubbish. So once I started feel a bit like jaded, that's it, I'd pack it in for the day, But luckily, touch wood, I never got like the writer's block, because a lot of it was from real life.
Yes,
I've changed all the names and so on, but it just flows then, doesn't it, from real life?
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that's the good thing about you doing that book, is that because it is real, you're not going to stump for the story, because you kind of know where it's going to be. I always think when people write a thriller, you think, how do you work out who's done it? Have you worked it out at the beginning?
That's right. What I mean? Yeah. I mean, there's twists and turns which I've made up, obviously. And at the end of the book, there's a real big twist. So it's based on fact. And I've used all, what can I say, vignettes and things and put them in. But the actual story is made up, the whole story.
Lovely. So what's next for you, Johnny, after the book? What? I mean, we're all in a very difficult dilemma now, but is there a part or a role or whatever, a musical, that you haven't done yet that you still think, you know what, I'd still like a crack at that? That's what I'd really like to go for.
I don't know. I mean, since this lockdown, I haven't done anything. Obviously, I had to cancel a few gigs before. And I've gone off I can't say I've gone off performing. That's not the right thing. But the game has changed. I mean, the cabaret, as you know, cabaret thing's gone. I mean, all the clubs are dead and so on.
Yeah.
So unless somebody asks me to do a musical or a play or whatever, I'm not looking for it. I'm quite happy. I've got a nice house. I got a few quid, and I'm loving my writing. I'm dancing in the garage, keep myself fit. So I just take it as it comes, whatever comes, My wife's an actress as well. She does, quite well. She was in My Family with Robert Lindsay.
Yeah.
And she's got a radio play, funny enough, to do next week for Radio BBC Wales. So I'm using their microphone at the moment, because they sent her a BBC microphone, so I'm using it. So between us, we do very well, and we've got 4 lovely grandkids, and I mean, we are just happy people now,
Yeah, it must be nice, because it's nice to get to that level, isn't it? I think it goes back to really what we were saying earlier on about the late Dorothy, is that to be older and to be struggling is very hard, because I think when you've been a huge star, and it happens to everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're Paul McCartney or whatever. I was talking to someone recently, and they said, and what was he in again?
Oh, that's terrible. Do you know, I got to tell you this. Vic Damone, beautiful singer, isn't he? Vic Damone.
Yes,
Sinatra said if God could sing, he'd sound like Vic Damone. I'm doing a cabaret on a ship, on a Sea Goddess. It was a little yacht. And it was always got big stars coming because it was quite exclusive.
Yeah.
And Vic Damone was on once. And he said, I rang my agent, he said, and some kid answered the phone. He says, what do you do, Mrs. Damone? Do you sing? I mean, there you go. But another one, I was singing away, and I'm looking out at the audience, and there's a guy in the front with a craggy face. I thought, I know that face. It was Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, yes.
The great Ernest Borgnine. So I came up, he said, good job, Jan, good job. I said, thank you, Mr. Borgnine. I said, call me Ernie, he said. I said, oh, okay, call you in. And I had dinner with him a couple of times. He was such a nice man. And I got a letter from his wife when I got back. In fact, I thought I'd show it to you. It's the letter.
Wow.
And she says, I'll read. She says, "Dear Johnny, it was such a pleasure seeing you again on the Sea Goddess. Ernie and I had a fabulous time. Especially loved the entertainment. You are so talented. It's obvious you really love what you do." I thought, wonderful letter from somebody like that. It really, you feel great. Yeah. You know, then you get all the knockers and all that, but once you get something like that, you think, oh, that's wonderful.
As you do get to meet your idols, some you like, some you don't like.
Some you don't.
And you just, but those you don't like, we keep smiling. And you just sort of think to yourself, you know, it's a lovely job because you do get to, you are privileged. It is a privileged world we live in. And if you make it big, as you rightly said, you know, you suddenly, like you know, you can be sat at a party and you're sat next to Phil Spector. And then when you're doing what I call normal world and you're in the little Tesco's queue or whatever, if you said to someone and they're like, what? You know, you...
the strangest thing is, I tell you this, Neil, I mean, as you know, I've done a hell of a lot in the business. I've been worked all over the world. But what people remember me now is being Marco and Gavin and Stacey. So people stop me in the street. I mean, it's ironic in a way, but I'm not knocking it. But you get people who kind of resent the fact. It's like poor old Keith Harris. He didn't like being like knowing he was Jess Orville because he had the other act with the monkey, you see, and things like that.
But it's what takes off, isn't it? I think that's the problem.
It's what you've got to go with it, haven't you?
Yeah, it is whatever takes off. You know, people, I always, I mean, it's interesting, a lot of game show hosts get quite funny about being known for game shows, but then...
Ted Rogers.
Yeah, if you're in the show every day and you're literally doing it to a massive audience, they don't care what you've done. You're the man that comes on with a bin.
That's right. He was such a lovely man, Ted. Again, a sad story. He lost all his money. Yeah. Don't ask me how he did that, because he was earning lots of money in his day. But he was do you know, he used to phone me every day to talk, just to say, because I met him in Australia. I was doing the South Sydney Juniors Club, and he was doing the St George's Club. We're in the same hotel. And I'm writing a letter, and he looks over, he says, "It's Johnny." And I said, "How do you remember me?" And we only did one gig together years before. Yeah. He said, I remember you. He said, and I was in a bad way at the time. I was having a divorce, and I was in, you know, really sad. I was down on the floor, and he kept me going. He was such a lovely guy. And he used to ring me up, "Chief, if you're not working, you come with me tonight because I don't want you on your own in case." He was fabulous to me. And then when I was so sad he lost that one. And then he died too young.
Yes. Yeah.
He had a heart attack or something.
I'm going to run out of time with you, but I just wanted to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You're great fun, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. We'll do it again soon, so thank you so much.
Well, give us a shout when the book's out. It'll be after Christmas, so we'll have a little chat about the book. I'll send it to you. When I get a copy, I'll send it to you.
I can't wait. Have a lovely afternoon, Johnny. Take care. Thank you.
And you. Thank you, Neil. Bye, love.
Working harder.